Welcome to the podcast of Philip and a deep dive into the world of AI, specifically DeepSeek. It's a new AI model coming out of China, and we're going to see if it can really compete with the big names like ChatGPT. We've got some YouTube reviews from developers who've been trying it out, and we'll unpack all the details, its capabilities, its strengths, weaknesses, what sets it apart, the whole nine yards.
Yeah, and one thing that's really interesting is that DeepSeek is being marketed as a more affordable option. Some of the more well-known AI models out there can cost like 2 cents per 1,000 tokens, but DeepSeek is way cheaper, like a fraction of the cost at zero point 0.2 cents.
Whoa, that's a big difference. So naturally it makes you wonder, is there a trade-off in terms of performance? Like one of the reviewers actually had DeepSeek try and build an entire web page from scratch. HTML, CSS, JavaScript, even animations.
And that's a really good example of what DeepSeek can potentially do, particularly for front-end development. I mean, the fact that it can generate functional code, even if it needs a little bit of fine-tuning, that's pretty amazing. But the reviewer did point out that there were some inconsistencies in the output. So it seems like while DeepSeek is capable, it might not be as reliable as some of the more established AI models just yet.
Right, yeah, it's not perfect. There was this other test where they challenged DeepSeek and ChatGPT to write thousands of unique sentences, each using a specific word. ChatGPT just cranked out 100 sentences like it was nothing and was ready for more. But DeepSeek, well, it kind of stalled out after 20 sentences on the first try and then 53 on the second.
That's interesting. It could be because of how DeepSeek is built with its mixture of experts architecture or MoE. So instead of having one massive neural network, it uses a bunch of smaller, more specialized networks. Kind of like a team of experts, each focusing on a specific area. This MoE approach can be super efficient, but it might mean that DeepSeek struggles with tasks that need a broader knowledge base or that involve generating a lot of text.
Yeah, that makes sense. So some limitations, but
Yeah.
potentially more efficient in other areas. And did I mention how much cheaper it is? Seriously, way cheaper.
It's definitely a huge plus, especially for developers working with limited budgets. That lower cost could open up all sorts of possibilities for AI integration, making it accessible to way more people and industries.
And speaking of making it accessible to a wider audience, let's talk about something a little more sensitive. One reviewer decided to see how DeepSeek would respond to questions about the Tiananmen Square protests. Interestingly, when it didn't have internet access, it basically went silent. But give it access, and it gives you a carefully worded answer that aligns with the official Chinese narrative.
That's a really important point, and it raises some questions about how DeepSeek deals with sensitive topics. It suggests that there might be some built-in mechanisms that are influencing its responses, especially when it comes to information that could be considered controversial or politically sensitive.
The reviewer actually managed to find what they called DeepSeek's prompt system. Basically, it's internal guidelines for generating content. And it emphasizes ethical and harmless content, but it doesn't actually define what those terms mean. So who gets to decide what's harmful? It's a bit of a gray area, isn't it?
Definitely. The whole concept of harm can be subjective and can vary a lot depending on cultural context, personal beliefs, all sorts of things. Without knowing how DeepSeek defines and applies these guidelines, it's hard to know if there's a potential for bias or manipulation.
Okay, before we wrap up this first part of our deep dive, let's touch on data privacy. The reviewer gave DeepSeek's privacy policy a pretty mediocre 5 out of 10 rating based on what they could find. No GDPR compliance, vague language about how data is used, storage limits, all of that raised some red flags.
That's a bit concerning. Even though DeepSeek has these impressive capabilities, its approach to data privacy seems to be lacking. That lack of transparency and the potential for data exploitation are definitely things that users need to be aware of. You know, it's interesting how DeepSeek handles those guidelines, especially compared to something like ChatGPT. Like ChatGPT will also refuse to create harmful content, but it's a lot more upfront about why.
Right, it'll actually tell you which rule or principle it's following, but with DeepSeek, it's kind of like we're left guessing.
Exactly. We know it has these guidelines, but how they're actually implemented and enforced is still a mystery. And this lack of transparency can be a little unsettling, especially when you think about how those guidelines could change or be influenced by outside forces.
It really makes you think about who has the power to decide what's considered harmful. It's
Mm.
such a subjective thing.
Absolutely. And that subjectivity is what makes this whole issue so complex. Like, what one culture might see as harmless could be completely offensive or harmful in another. Without knowing how DeepSeek makes those decisions, it's really hard to assess whether there's a risk of bias or manipulation.
So it seems like we've got this really affordable AI with some pretty impressive capabilities.
Mm.
But there are also these big ethical questions and data privacy issues that we can't just brush aside. Feels like a tough decision for anyone thinking about using DeepSeek.
It really comes down to carefully weighing the risks and benefits. Like, for some people, that lower cost and the things DeepSeek can do might outweigh the potential downsides. But for others, especially those working with sensitive information or in fields where ethics are really important, the risks might be too high.
It all goes back to being informed users, right? We need to understand the limitations and potential biases of these AI tools
Mhm.
and use that knowledge to make responsible choices about which one we choose and how we use it.
Couldn't agree more. And these conversations need to happen on a larger scale, too. Like, how do we balance the potential benefits of AI with these ethical concerns?
Hmm.
How do we ensure transparency and accountability in AI development? These are questions that need answers, especially as AI becomes more and more integrated into our lives.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit and go back to DeepSeek's performance. One reviewer actually compared it head-to-head with ChatGPT on a specific coding task. They asked them both to generate code for a simple game using Python.
Oh, yeah. I remember that comparison. It was fascinating to see how they approach the problem in different ways. ChatGPT, with all its data and access to coding resources, delivered fully functional code, no problem. But DeepSeek, well, it kind of struggled.
Yeah, it seemed to get the general idea but missed some important details. It even generated code that relied on a sound file that wasn't even included in the project.
That's a good example of a key difference between these models, their access to information. ChatGPT, being developed by OpenAI, has access to a much wider range of data and resources, including code libraries on all sorts of examples. DeepSeek, while impressive in its own right, might be a bit limited in that respect, which could explain why it doesn't perform as well on certain tasks.
So it's not just about the AI model itself, it's about the whole ecosystem it's developed in and the data it has access to.
Exactly. It's kind of like comparing a student who has a huge library at their fingertips to a student who only has a few textbooks. Both students might be smart and capable, but their learning and performance are going to be affected by the resources they have available.
It's a good reminder that AI is still evolving. We're seeing these models get better all the time, but they're not perfect yet.
For sure, AI is constantly changing and improving. DeepSeek, despite its limitations, shows just how much progress is being made, especially in natural language processing and code generation. It's pretty exciting to think about what the future holds as these models continue to develop.
Speaking of the future, let's talk about the business side of things.
Yeah.
Like, what kind of impact could DeepSeek have on the AI market?
Well, its affordability is a huge advantage, that's for sure. It could really shake things up, especially for developers and companies that want to integrate AI without breaking the bank.
And usually, competition leads to innovation and better products for everyone, right?
In theory, yes, but there's also the issue of market dominance. Since DeepSeek is being developed and backed by China, some people are worried about a potential shift in power within the AI industry.
That opens up a whole other can of worms. Economic influence, technological competition, national security implications. That's a lot to unpack, and probably a bit too much for our deep dive today.
Definitely a conversation worth having, though. The development and use of AI aren't just about technological advancements anymore. They're becoming intertwined with geopolitics as well.
So we've explored the technical capabilities of DeepSeek, looked at the data privacy concerns, and even touched on the potential market disruption it could cause. It's clear that this is more than just another AI model.
It's a convergence of technological innovation, ethical challenges, and geopolitical dynamics. And as AI continues to evolve, these complexities are only going to become more prominent.
This has been part 2 of our deep dive into DeepSeek. Be sure to join us for the final part, where we'll tackle the big questions about its potential impact on the future of AI. Welcome back to Loop Podcast to Philip and the final part of our deep dive into DeepSeek.
Yeah, it's been a fascinating look at this new AI model and all its potential.
Definitely, and in this last part, we're going to tackle the big question, what could DeepSeek mean for the future of AI?
Well, one thing's for sure, the AI landscape is evolving rapidly, and DeepSeek is just one piece of that puzzle.
It seems like every day there's a new breakthrough or development in the world of AI.
Absolutely. And the rise of open source models like DeepSeek is really shaking things up. It's making AI more accessible to developers and researchers all over the world, which means we're likely to see a wider range of AI applications emerging.
So we could be seeing AI integrated into our everyday lives in ways we haven't even thought of yet. Like, imagine AI-powered personalized medicine or smarter transportation systems. The possibilities seem endless.
They really do, but of course, with those advancements come new challenges. As we've discussed, bias, transparency, and privacy are all major concerns.
That's right. And addressing those ethical considerations becomes even more important as AI becomes more powerful and more widespread.
Exactly. We need to make sure that AI development and usage are responsible and benefit society as a whole.
Now, there's been a lot of talk about AI models becoming more specialized. Instead of having one model try to do everything, we might see AI specifically designed for certain tasks, like medical diagnoses or financial forecasting.
Yeah, that's a trend that's already happening. And models like DeepSeek, with its mixture of experts architecture, are paving the way for that kind of specialization,
So by focusing on specific areas, AI can become more accurate and efficient.
which could lead to more reliable and impactful applications in all sorts of fields.
It's kind of mind-blowing to think about. Imagine a world where your doctor consults an AI specialist for a diagnosis, or your financial advisor uses AI to manage your investments, and your car drives itself using specialized AI. It sounds pretty futuristic, doesn't it?
It does, but it might not be as far off as we think. The combination of specialized AI, increasing computing power, and advancements in data analytics is making that future a real possibility.
Okay, but what about the human element in all of this? Are we all going to be replaced by robots?
Well, that's a question a lot of people have. But it's important to remember that AI is a tool. It's meant to enhance our capabilities, not replace us entirely.
So instead of being afraid of AI, we should be thinking about how we can work with it, how we can use it to solve problems, create new opportunities, and ultimately make our lives better.
Right, the future of AI is all about collaboration. It's about humans and machines working together to achieve things that neither could do alone.
And who knows, maybe DeepSeek, with its unique capabilities and affordability, will play a big part in shaping that future.
It's definitely possible as AI continues to evolve. It'll be fascinating to see how models like DeepSeek influence the technological landscape and how we as a society adapt to those changes.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into DeepSeek. We've covered a lot of ground, from the technical aspects to the ethical considerations and even the potential geopolitical implications.
It's been a really interesting exploration, and I hope our listeners have enjoyed it.
Me too. And a huge thanks to our expert for sharing their insights with us today.
It's been a pleasure.
For everyone listening, remember, the world of AI is constantly evolving, so stay curious, keep asking questions, and keep exploring. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast DeFIP on YouTube for more deep dives into the world of tech and innovation. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing.